Hello everybody, in this video we are going to cover everything we need to know video editing in the Cambridge International AS and A-Level certificate. So here we have the syllabus open for Cambridge International 9626. So let's quickly have a look at the content. We see that we are in this video going to be dealing with sound and video editing, and we are going to deal with this part in this video. A bunch of things that we need to know, and these points I have transferred to my to-do list, and one by one we're going to walk through them. So let's start with setting the aspect ratio. So here we have Kdenlive open. Let's start by importing some video and some other resources. I have downloaded this audio from a website called FreePD. I also have an image from Pexels and a video from Pexels. Let's start by importing the video. Select the video, click and drag it to the project bin. And as we do that, I see that we have an option to switch the profile of the project to match the profile of the clip I just imported. I'm going to click on switch for now. And next, let's go on to the first point in the checklist. Set the aspect ratio. So what is the aspect ratio? The aspect ratio shows how wide the image is with respect to how high it is. We can change this in the project settings. Click on project, click on project settings. And here we have a bunch of predefined project settings. Right now we have a frame size of 1080 pixels by 1920 pixels. This corresponds to an aspect ratio of 9:16. If I select another profile, you see that the values here will change. Here we have a square profile. The aspect ratio is 1:1. Here we have another aspect ratio 16:9, but with a much smaller resolution. You can switch between the different preset profiles by using the arrow. What do all these letters and numbers mean? Well, for now you don't need to worry about it. But what's interesting to know is that if we pick this QCIF-PAL, we have a different aspect ratio of 4:3. By far, the most common types of aspect ratios are 16:9 and 4:3. We see that the profiles are arranged in different folders. Higher resolutions are in the top and the lower resolutions are in the bottom. So I'm rather going to change it to a low resolution, which is 4:3. We get a warning message that says changing the profile of your project cannot be undone. So definitely if the exam asks you to change the aspect ratio, it should be the first thing you do, because if you need to change it later, it's going to cause all sorts of possible problems. So definitely do this as make sure you've set the proper aspect ratio at the beginning of the exam. And here down here we see that the project profile has changed, and we see up here that it's been saved under a different name, so that we still have our original file just in case something goes wrong. And that's how we change the aspect ratio of our project. So what's the next thing? Trim a video to remove unwanted footage. So in order to trim a video, the first thing we have to do is we click and drag it over here. and we see that it has two parts to it. It's got the V part, which is a video, and the A part, which is audio. This particular clip has an empty audio, which we can see because this green has no squiggles in it. We want to trim this. We can easily do that by clicking and dragging. And as we click and drag, we see in the bottom right hand corner by how much we've changed the video. We can also move to the end of the video and click and drag the back off. At the bottom right hand corner, we now see the duration of the video. Another thing we can do is we can change to the razor tool, and we can click and click to cut the video in pieces, and in this way we can easily rearrange different segments of video. If I want to remove one segment, you just press delete. Incidentally, we can zoom in on this timeline to get more precise control over what we're doing with the clip. And to do that, we hold down the control button and then use the mouse wheel to zoom in. We can also pan using the mouse wheel. So that's how to trim video and remove unwanted footage. If we want to splice and join together video clips, it's quite easy. I cut this piece using the razor tool, if you will recall. And if I want to group them together, I just select one, hold down Shift and select the other, and I press Ctrl G to group them. But now I've grouped them and there's a gap in the middle, so if I want to fix that, I can right click on them and go to ungroup, or I can press Ctrl Shift G. Let's move them right next to each other so there's no gap in between, and we'll select them both again and press Ctrl G to group them. And let's move it all the way to the front of the video. So that's how to splice or join together video clips. Next, we're going to talk about creating text-based slides. Creating text-based slides is quite easy. You just go to the project bin and right-click and choose Add Title Clip. Now, up here we have a bunch of tools we can use. Currently, I have the text tool, add text. I'm going to click on add text, and over here I'm going to write welcome, or whatever text you like. You can see that I have quite a big font size. I can change that over here. I can also change the font. I can change the color of the text, and I can change the outline. And I can decrease the size of the outline, or I can even decrease it all the way to 0 to remove it entirely. We also have an align. If I had more than one line, I could use these buttons to center it in the middle, or center it on a line to the right, or a line to the left. We can also use these buttons to align the text box to the screen. I'm going to put it on the top left. And when I'm done, I'm going to click on Create. Wait, let's have a look here. Now I have the selection tool activated, and with the selection tool I can select a text box and move it around. Or I could add a rectangle and set the properties of the rectangle here. I can also add an oval. That's quite useful actually. Right now I have a transparent background, but I can change the background color to opaque and I can set it to any color I want. But in fact, I prefer I'm going to keep it on, I think I'm going to keep it on transparent. And now that I have the text clip, I can click and drag it over the video I already have. And as you can see, it's superimposed over the image I have. And I can edit it and I can move it around. I think red is a bit easier to read, and I'm going to move it up here. The caption can be moved in the timeline to the left and to the right, and you can extend it. You can change the duration in the same way. You can also right-click and click on Edit Duration. If you need to put in a precise number for the duration, you can just type it over here. For example, 11 seconds. And I will set the duration precisely. So that's all for creating text-based slides. Next, let's talk about creating credit. Quite a simple matter in Kdenlive. Once again, we just create a simple text overlay, a title clip, and I'm gonna type in the credits. So let's left align it. And now let's just decrease the size of this, and let's copy and paste the clip just to have a background in which the credits are coming up on. This would already be an efficient credit, but normally in movies the credits are moving upwards. They start at the bottom and they just move slowly upwards. So to do that, we are going to use a composition effects. We have two categories of effects: composition and effects. Why are they categorized in two different types? I don't really know, but let's not ask difficult questions. Let's just go to the tab composition next to the project bin and take the slide effect and just drag and drop it onto the text. And here we see that it's sliding from the left of the screen to the middle. We can click on the effect, and in the bottom right we see some settings of the effect. We see the start position and the end position. So let's put the start position to the bottom, and we want to put the end position at the top. And now you see it goes all the way like that. It's coming in a bit fast. So I want to slow it down, and I can slow it down by just increasing the duration. So we set the duration to 5 seconds, and let's have a preview. So that's how you add credits. Okay, next we're gonna add captions and subtitles. You can easily do it in the same way as we did before, using a bunch of title clips. However, a much easier way is just to activate the subtitle tool, which you can do by clicking on this icon here. And once that's done, you have a new track, which is called the subtitle track. I double click on it to add text. For example, I'm gonna say whatever she's saying. I can move the subtitles back and forth just like with video clips. And you can extend it and you can make it shorter too. When we eventually render it, it's going to create a subtitle file called the SRT file. If you open this SRT file in a text editor, you will see a simple text with just a timestamp and a subtitle. And that explains how to add captions and subtitles. Okay, next we're going to talk about fading effects. There's basically two ways to do it. There's the short way and the long way. And the long way, you go to Effects and you search for Fade. We've got audio effects, which fades in and fades out the audio. And then you've got motion, where it, fades to black. So it either fades from black or it fades to black. So let's select fade in, and I'm going to go to this final clip and I'm going to drag and drop the effect over the clip. And what does that do? It suddenly goes to black, and as we scroll it becomes lighter and lighter. So a typical thing they do in movies is they fade out. They fade to black. And it gets darker and darker. You will notice that as I have this clip selected with the fade in and the fade out, two bars appeared here, and I can change the duration of the fade in and fade out. So I can make it super fast, just 10 frames, or I can make it take a long time, a super long time, like the entire length of the clip. You see how long it takes, and then it fades out again. If I want to remove any effect, I can always click on this trash can to delete a fade effect or any other effect that I add to the currently selected clip. I told you there's going to be an easy way. The easy way is just to select the clip, and you will see a little blue dot on the top, and you just drag that. And it does exactly the same thing. Or for the fade out, you just click on this red dot and you click and drag, and it does exactly the same thing. Anyway, that's how to add fading effects. Remember, you can do exactly the same thing for video and for audio. Okay, let's talk about pan and zoom effects. But before I get started, I would like, it's getting a bit messy here. I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff. So I'm just going to click, hold down Shift, click and drag to select all the clips I have here. All the effects, the audio, the video, the text, and the subtitles or captions. And I'm just going to click on, I'm just going to press delete to remove them all and start with a clean slate. And what was I doing again? Oh yeah, I was adding a pan and zoom effects. So pan and zoom effects can be found under the effects. We remove the search we've done so far. And let's see, we're interested in transform, distort, and perspective. And over here we have a transform effect. Transform just means we're going to change the shape or the position of the clip. So click and drag the transform effect onto the clip. And here we have the X position and the Y position, the vertical position and the horizontal position that we can change. And we can also change the width and the height. We can change the zoom, the opacity, and the rotation. So let's have a look. We don't need to do this, but when we change the rotation, we can see it's a pretty interesting effect going on over there. So let's set it back to 0. And let's look at what the size does. So this is, in other words, a zoom effect. This is the result. We can see each pixel now because we zoomed in a bit too much. Let's set it back to 100%. And another thing we can do is pan, which means we move it either leftwards and rightwards or upwards and downwards. We can do that by changing the x coordinate or moving it horizontally and changing the y coordinate to move it vertically. So that explains how we can use the transform effect to apply a pan and a zoom. The funny thing about this pan effect is that we don't have to apply it only once, but we can also add an animation to it. So we can make the pan happen gradually and we can make the zoom happen gradually. So that's what we're going to learn in the next point, how to add animation to effects. We have here our transform effect, which we just dragged and dropped onto the clip. So what we can do is we can make this transition happen gradually. We can make this zoom in happen gradually. To do that, we need to add keyframes, and we've already added one keyframe all the way at the beginning. The keyframe at the beginning is going to be what's called the initial position for the effect. Then we want to move on to the next position for the effect. So let's say after, I don't know how many seconds. Exactly 2 seconds. I'm going to add another keyframe. So that's to click on this button. And after 2 seconds in, I want to be zoomed in by 200%. So here we have a 200% zoom after 2 seconds and a 100% zoom at 0 seconds. So what's going to happen in between? In between, it's going to gradually change the value from 0 to 2, from 1% at the beginning to 200%, excuse me, from 100% at the beginning to 200% after 2 seconds. That means at 1 second, it's going to be exactly halfway, 150%. We can add more keyframes. So let's say after that, all the way at the end, I'm going to add one more keyframe and I'm going to put it back on 100%. So let's see what happens. We zoom in until 2 seconds and then we gradually zoom out again for the remainder of the clip. If we want to remove a keyframe, you just click on it and you click on this minus to remove it. You can also jump from keyframe to keyframe by clicking on this to jump to the previous keyframe, or this to jump to the next keyframe. And that's how to add an animated effect. We can add animations to not only transform, but also other effects as well. For example, we can add an animation to corners. So let's click and drag corners to the clip, select the clip so that we can see the effect down here. And just to keep things simple, let's remove the transformation effect we applied earlier. And here we have the first keyframe. We're going to move the corners around to have a kind of weird effect. This is going to be our starting position. And now, at the end of the clip, we want a completely different one. And let's see what happens. It's quite an interesting effect. You can do a lot of funny stuff with that. And let's add one more effect. Box blur. Let's add this text. Add the box blur to the text. Select the text. And let's set the initial values to very blurry. And then after 1 second, I want it to be not blurry at all. So let's add another keyframe over here and set the blur factor to 0. And let's see what happens. That's a pretty interesting effect too. Let's go to the end of the clip. And we're gonna go exactly 1 second sooner. 1 second before the end of the clip. Add another keyframe and keep the value as it is so that it stays on 0 this whole time. And then go to the final frame of the clip. Add another keyframe and set it to the same as it was before, which was 17. And let's see what happens. And that's all about adding animation effects. Next, we're gonna extract a still image from a video clip. This is quite an easy one. What you just do is you pick the frame you want to extract, maybe this one, maybe this one. And once you've picked it, you go up to the project monitor, you simply right click and you choose extract frame to project. Then you want to pick your folder in which you're going to store the file and of course the file name. I'm just going to name mine random frame from my project. I just gave it a stupid name because this is just a demonstration, but obviously if you're working on a bigger project you'd do well to give it a sensible name. So, and pick a sensible folder. So I'm just going to leave it in the folder I currently have open. We go back to our project bin and we see here, there we go, we have a random frame from my project.png. But if I click and drag it to my timeline, I see that in fact the duration is 5 seconds long, but it's just a single stationary picture, 5 seconds long. And I can just make it shorter or I can make it longer, just as I did before. I can add a fade in and fade out just as any, just treat it like another clip. And I can move it, I'm going to move it here to the end of my video and I'm going to just make it a bit shorter until it's exactly 2 seconds long. Remember, bottom right hand corner, you can see the duration of the clip and how much you're changing the clip by. And that's all. That's how you extract a still image from a video clip. Next, we are going to resize and crop a still image to match the video's aspect ratio. To show you what they mean, let's first take an image which I downloaded from Pexels to demonstrate this. Just take the image, click and drag it to the project bin to import it into your project. Now we have the image here, we select it and we click on Clip Properties and we see that the size of the image is much larger than the size of the project. So let's see what happens when I click and drag it into the timeline. As you can see, it automatically gets resized to fit the project. However, we have this little black stripe over here because the aspect ratio, even though it's been automatically shrunk to fit the widths, the aspect ratio doesn't match up. So the height is, there's a significant gap. And if we want to get rid of this gap, we need to resize the picture. To do that, the most straightforward thing to do is to go to Effects, select Transform again, and click and drag it over the image. As we click and drag it over the image, we see that there's an annoying change. So to avoid that, let's put the image back to its original size. We can click over here to do that. And now we cannot see it. So let's make sure it's centered on the screen. We center it horizontally and we center it vertically. So here you see what I mean. We see the middle of the picture, but it's far too big for us. So we can adjust this by zooming out. And we have to find the right level to zoom out to. So it's pretty good like that, but in this way we're just cutting off a little bit of the edges, which is not necessarily desirable. So if you want to be precise and you don't want to cut off any edges because maybe there's some important information, then we need to modify the picture in a way that we actually change the aspect ratio. To do that, we need to click on Distort. Once we distort it, we can change the height of the image while keeping the width the same. So we adjust a bit the X and the Y values until we get it just right. If we wanted to crop part of the image out, that would be easy. We just increase the size of the image so that part of it is off the edge. So we cut off part of the image. And that's all for resizing and cropping a still image to match the video's aspect ratio. Which brings us to the next. Insert a still image, which we just did. It's really easy. You just click and drag into the project bin, and there we have the new image. So we can just check that one off too. Since we're on a roll anyway, let's also check off the add sound to a video clip. How do we add sound to a video clip? Here is a song I downloaded from a website called FreePD, which has a lot of beautiful music. I just click and drag the audio file to the project bin, and there we have it. We can treat audio files just in the same way as we treat video clips. So let's mark that one off as done too. Next, we're going to alter the speed of a video clip. So I've seen that my timeline has gotten super messy again. So once again, I'm just going to hold down Shift and then click and drag to select all the clips and text titles and special effects and everything in my video. And I'm just press Delete to remove them. What we're going to do now is we are going to alter the speed of a video clip. So let's take our original clip, drag and drop, zoom in a little, right click, change speed. Super easy. We can double the speed of the clip. Now it's twice as fast. We can even say we want to do 10 times. Quite fast. Or if you like, we can slow it down to about 50%. Put it in slow motion. Or even slower. Well, I think you get it. And that explains how we alter the speed of a video clip. Next, we are going to use filters and color correction. So here under effects, we have color and image correction. We can apply these color corrections just in the same way as the other effects. For example, if I want to adjust the brightness, I can just click and drag the brightness onto the clip. Then we have right now it right now at 100%, and if I want to make it brighter, I just increase it, and now it's much brighter. Or I can make it less bright, and I decrease it, it gets darker and darker. A lot of these effects we can add keyframes. So let's start at an intensity of 0 and gradually make it darker, light, brighter and brighter until we get double brightness. Let's see what happens. Quite interesting. We can also add different kinds of, in addition to brightness, we can also, for example, do an RGB adjustment. RGB stands for red, green and blue. So we can adjust the amount of red and green and blue inside our clip. So if I want to take out all the red, I just put it down to 0. And now we only have green and blue left. Let's boost the amount of green. And in fact, why don't we just take down all the blue as well? We've got it basically in shades of green now. We can also keyframe this if we want to. Let's say it's getting redder and redder. Oh my goodness, I forgot to add a keyframe. So it starts off as completely red and it ends up as completely green. Let's see what it looks like. Quite interesting. You can make some quite interesting effects like this. Another interesting one is saturation. Saturation just means how much color is in the image. So let's see, we have the saturation at 125. If we increase it, the yellows become bright yellower, the greens become greener and the blues become bluer. But if we decrease it, on the other hand, it turns gradually into shades of gray. So if you put the saturation to 0, it's black and white. And if you put the saturation super up, it looks a bit like a cartoony. And there's some more interesting ones here, but I don't think I will go into too much detail. I think contrast speaks for itself. It's fun to play around with them. So that's what I recommend you do. Just have a little fun with them to get a good feel for what they do. So some of you may have noticed that I accidentally forgot one point from the checklist, so I'm gonna cover it now. Before we start with exporting, so we have just one thing I forgot, how to remove sound from a video clip. It's actually quite easy. Just take, you have noticed that this V is for video and A is for audio, and all the audio tracks will be in these levels. So just if you want to remove any part of the audio, just remove that part. Remember that these here, the video part and the audio part are grouped together. So before I delete it, I have to right click and ungroup clips. And then I can just select the audio part only and just press delete. Or alternatively, if you want, you can mute an entire track just by clicking. So I cannot hear it even if I play it. But this can create confusion because sometimes you won't notice if it's muted or not. So if you're sure you want it gone and you don't just want it temporarily gone, you just select it, delete it. And that's how you remove sound from a video clip. Next, we're going to talk about exporting. To do that, to export, you just click on render. Pick the output file and the output folder and the output file name. I'm on Linux, but if you're on Windows, you'll probably see something like C drive stroke and then your folder name, users, and stuff like that. But I'm on Linux, so it looks a bit different on mine, but don't worry about that. Make sure you know which folder you're putting your output file in. You can always click on this one to use a good old file manager to pick your folder which you want. Now we have different types of files we can export to. For example, we can export to WebM or the good old MP4 that everybody loves, or MPEG files. We also have, and we've got old ones like AVI or Windows Media Player, WMV. So which other ones did we need to learn? Where's my checklist? MP4, AVI, MOV, and WMV. So let's have a look at specifically those. What was it asking for? MP4, that's MP4. Next, AVI. Which one was AVI? It's one of the old ones, right? This would be AVI under old TV definition. MOV. That would be found under videos with alpha MOV. That's a MOV file. And finally WMV, a Windows Media. You'll find that one under old TV as well. So once you've picked the file format you want, you just click on render. And it should take maybe some seconds or maybe some minutes, depending on how complicated your project is. And then you just find it in your folder and you test it. So that's all for exporting a video in different file formats. In the very final checklist, we are going to compress a video to different resolutions. So to compress a video is actually quite similar to exporting it. So when you export a video, you're actually compressing raw video data and you're putting it into a file format. And that file format is always compressed, so long as it's not the raw video data. The MP4, AVI, MOV, and WMV, there are all examples of compressed raw video data, in other words. You've got two types of compression. You've got lossless compression and you've got lossy compression. Lossless compression means you don't lose any quality as compared to the raw data. It takes up less space than the raw data, but the quality is still exactly the same. While lossy, it's better at compressing, so you manage to save more space. However, for some of that space which is saved, you have to sacrifice quality. So with lossy compression, quality is sacrificed, but you end up saving more space. So if you want to make a video for internet, it's usually a good idea to be conscious of how much space you have. If you want to export for DVD, it usually doesn't matter that much. In the worst case, you can spread it over your movie over multiple DVDs if it's really taking up a lot of space. Most of the time you don't really need to worry about quality because the amount of quality lost in lossy compression is not much and the human eye usually can't pick it up. But sometimes you might need a lossless format. In that case, it's best to stick to AVI, which is lossless, and MOV. which is lossless. So if you find yourself, you've created a file and you find that it's actually too big, the exported file is too big, there are things you can do to make it smaller, to compress it further. You click on render, and when you select your file type, you can click on more options. Over here you can choose quality of your file. If you lower the quality, the size of the exported file will be smaller. We can also rescale the canvas size over here. You would be decreasing the resolution of your video. And those are the two main things that you can do to compress your file further if it's not small enough yet. Another thing you can do, but I wouldn't do it unless you're desperate, is you can go to project settings, and you can change the profile of your video. Remember, we talked about this in the beginning. Make sure you pick the right profile before you get started, because changing it now might cause all sorts of problems with your effects. So what you can do here is you can decrease the number of frames per second, but try to be careful that you keep the same aspect ratio. That would decrease the chances of something going wrong. So for example, I will pick this video instead, which is a smaller resolution, and it's now 15 frames per second as opposed to 25 frames per second what it was before. So this video will be much smaller. But as I told you, changing the profile of your project cannot be undone, and it might cause some problems. So I'm going to click on cancel. It might be interesting to know also that when you're picking your project profile, SD and DVD profiles are usually what's chosen for a DVD format. If you intend to make something for DVD, best to pick one of these. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. We've completed the entire checklist. I hope this video was helpful for you. Good luck on the exam. See you later.